Thank you for joining me today to show you how to make this 3D fishy card using the Calming Koi stamp and die set from the June 2024 Altenew release. This is a layering die set, so we are going to make some layered up 3D fishies. I'll go over all these layers with you as we create the card. And I'm also going to be using the water stencil from the June release, as well as the black Onyx gem sparkles. These are great. Look at those. I made a swatch of the inks from the release, so I would have this handy as I put together my card. And I chose to use Mossy Meadow and Misty Sage. This is going to be for our water. For the fish, I chose Raspberry Sunset, Melted Butterscotch, and Peachy Glow. Now, to these inks, I also brought in the crisp dye inks in Industrial Diamond and Ocean Waves. We've got clear embossing powder, liquid enamel, tweezers, double-sided tape, and of course our stamp wheel. Now, the rest of the parts here, the acetate layer we're going to be using, a vellum, and of course an A2 size card base. I will also have all of the instructions of what I used listed below in the description box. So let's start with the water. Now this is heavyweight vellum. I'm going to stick it down to my stamp wheel. I am a heavy-handed ink blender, so when I put the stencil over this, I'm going to tape it down with the purple tape, because I cannot be trusted that I will not accidentally wiggle around the waves on the water stencil. And lining up my inks here for the water, starting with the lighter of the green, the Misty Sage. I'm going to just add that strategically. And when I say strategically, that means I'm going to start in one spot and see where I end up. So I do want to add the ink so that not only are they blended in areas, but you can also tell where the light and the dark and the blue is. So I did leave spaces in between the Misty Sage, and in between those I'm going to add the Mossy Meadow, following the pattern that I ended up with. Now remember, it's water. It's not perfect. Whatever it is, it's water. And now we're going to go and add the blue. I do like to wipe my brushes off. You'll see I wipe my brushes off between every application, even if I'm using a green brush and two different greens. It's a cat hair thing. I just have to. And then in the remaining white areas, I'm going to add that blue, blend that all in. Now we are adding dye ink to vellum. Vellum does not absorb ink. The ink is going to sit on top of the vellum. So use your tweezers and be very careful when you take your stencil off of the vellum. And then very carefully, again using tweezers, be careful when you take the vellum off of the stamp wheel or your sticky mat, whatever you're using, because you don't want to get fingerprints all up on your water. We are going to be using the clear embossing powder and covering this entire panel. So I am laying out a piece of scrap paper to pour all of my embossing powder on. Yep, get it covered all nice. And when you move it around, make sure you get every last inch. We want this entire panel covered with the clear embossing powder. And normally when you're embossing things, you can use like clothespins or tweezers or something to hold on to it while you emboss. But because we are embossing this entire panel from side to side, top to bottom, I am laying it flat on my craft mat, and I'm using a wood-handled stylus to hold it down while I emboss. And yes, you can emboss right on your craft mat. It's great for embossing. Once I had a spot that I could hold that had dried from the embossing, then I can pick it up and rotate it and move it. And then do a last final check to see if there's any little spots you missed. Now come back in with the darker green, the Mossy Meadow, and we're going to add some color to those white ripple lines where the stencil was. I'm not going to cover all of them because I'm trying to recreate the look of rippling water. So I'm just going to like dab and splatter on and just hit some areas with this green. Some of the white areas with the green. And again, that is ink on a shiny surface. So we're going to hit it with the heat gun here just to set it real quick. There's not a lot of ink, so that is going to set just fine. Perfect. Set that aside and take out the die set for the fish. Now, this die set makes 2 layered fish bodies. You want to look at the layers carefully because one part of the body has whiskers and one does not. And then there's fin layers. So to start the layering of the fish, pick up your pieces. They're 2 identical pieces per fish, but like I said, one has whiskers sticking out. That's the sign for whiskers. And one does not. So we're going to start with the layer for each body that has the whiskers. And when I am doing die cut embellishments, I like to use scraps of 110-pound classic Crest cardstock. And now this card does have 3 fish on it, so after I cut out 2, I'm going to cut 1 more. Now the stamp set does have a stamp to stamp eyes. The eyeballs for these fish are stamped onto this white layer. I practiced with the stamp, and because I am heavy-handed, I had a little bit of difficulty getting my eyeballs straight, which is fine. They're fish. I guess it wouldn't matter. But I did choose to use some liquid enamel to dot their eyes on there, and you saw I used a practice sheet so I could get the right consistency. So I'm going to stick their little eyes on. And this stuff will dry really, really quick, but you can see there the eyes next to the whiskers. For the next layer of the fish, we're going to do their fins, and we're going to do the same thing we did with the water. We're going to add the Peachy Glow ink onto another scrap of the heavy vellum ink. I inked almost the entire surface, but I did leave a spot this time for me to hold on to the vellum. You're going to pour the clear embossing powder again over the entire ink blended area. And of course, since I left a spot, now I can hold it comfortably without burning my fingers. And heat set all that embossing powder. Now we are going to lay the dies for the fin layers onto that vellum that we just embossed. Excuse me. And you see I am putting a little shim in here. I like to put it's just a piece of plastic that I have. I like to use a shim when I am die cutting vellum, especially if I've given it this enamel finish. It just gives it a really nice, crisp outline cut. And the very cool thing about this die set is those fin layers actually have embossing in them. So when you cut into this enameled vellum, you can really see the detail from the embossing for the fins. And then, of course, we got to get our decorative fins. The 4th layer of the fish here is the decorative fins. And since we are cutting out of for the fin body layer, we're going to go ahead and cut these ones too, so we don't have to do it later. And I like to get every last inch I can out of my scraps that I've made, so I am working these fins around. There we go. Use your purple tape. The fins can move when they're underwater, but not when they're going through the embossing machine. All right, and they come out so nice. Oh, they're so pretty. And I am saving my tape because that purple tape, you know, you can get a lot of mileage out of that purple tape. It's got a lot of life left in it, and you don't need much when you're holding something down in your die cutting machine. I'm setting the little fins off to the side so we don't lose them. Look at that detail. That's from the embossing into that enameled vellum. And just be careful when you remove them, and then I'm keeping them all together on the side. I'm keeping a pile of the white bodies and then the pile of the fins. There's just using the point of the tweezers there to poke out that little fin. Now we're going to create the colored layer of the fish. This would be fish layer number 3. And if you don't know what color koi fish are, you can look on the packaging. It does give you a color guide on the back of the stamp set. I'm starting with the red. I wanted to give them like a rainbow look, even though I only was using the fishy colors, the red, orange, and the yellow. So I'm doing a 3-color rainbow ombre here, starting with the red, and then I'm going to blend the orange into the red. I didn't want to get my swatch messy there. So now I'm going to take the orange. Now, a tip to blending, especially if you're doing a rainbow or an ombre blending, when you start adding your second color, when you've like finished where you want that second color, blend it backwards into the color before it just a little bit so they overlap. That will give you a smoother transition of your coloring. And so now you'll see me do that again with the yellow, adding the peachy glow here. I'm going to backfill a little bit of it onto that orange so they blend really nice together. So there is our rainbow for our fish. Now I'm also going to do the shadows. We have a shadow layer. This is what gives the 3D effect. So this is a shadow of our fish. And to do that, I'm adding the industrial diamond to the big blending brush to save me some time, because that blending brush covers a lot of space really fast. So there are our inking. That's our inking for this project. That's pretty much it for the inking. So we're going to start cutting out the layers. Now again, going for the body layers, this time we don't want that layer with the whiskers. We want the layer without the whiskers. So watch out for that. I'm going to lay them in color succession. I want the fish to go from red, orange to yellow. So right here, I've got the 2 laid down first, and there's plenty of room for the third one. Tape those down so they don't move. And what's cool about scraps like this is once you've cut out what you needed, you can save this for doing another set of fish. Or, since you're doing your stamping and your die cutting right now, you just make a whole bunch of fish. Have a little fish tank on your desk with extra fish in it, and next time you make a fishy card, you'll have a lot of extras. Here I'm adding the third body into the yellow area to finish my rainbow effect. And yep, I am putting my dies away right back immediately so I don't lose them. I do that with my stamps too, especially those little ones that, you know how they are. They wander off. They end up in your pocket or stuck to a cat, and we can't have that. So there's the colors, red, orange, yellow. Now we're going to do the shadows. So the shadows for the fish are using the same layers that we made the fin layer out of. We're going to need 3 of those. They are cute. These little fish, I have to say, the more I see these fish, the more I love them. Here we are with 3 shadows for our fish. I've got those now. I've got these all off to the side in piles. So now we can start layering the card. So this is an 80-pound A2 size card base. And the vellum layer, I cut it like a 1/16 of an inch smaller than 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So that when I adhere it, I'm going to that'll make sure that the entire piece is on the front of the card and there's not any weird off-hanging corners. And it is okay to use double-sided sticky tape for this panel because you won't see the adhesive with all of the embossing that we did on top of it. And I do like to use double-sided sticky tape when possible to hold down vellum. Now we have to make our shoreline. So I just grabbed another white scrap, cut it down to an angle, and I'm going to put my finger down there, start where the angle is, and feel it backwards towards the fold of the card. And that's where I'm going to mark a spot to trim it off. And I am going to use my paper trimmer. I do not trust myself to cut that much of a straight line with just scissors. I am not afraid to admit that. I can cut with scissors a straight line, maybe 1/4 of an inch, and then I'm done. I can fussy cut around a flower, no problem, but a straight line, no, we're going to go ahead and use the paper cutter for that. And you could make that any other color. You could do a brown or something if you wanted it to be like a real shoreline. I just did white so we could see the sentiment really well. Now I'm laying it on there to get a good feel of composition for the rest of the card and bringing in the fish shadows. This is why I have put the shoreline down there so that I can place where the fish are going to end up going. And that's going to be based on where we put their shadows. So figuring out where their shadows go, I'm going to use the liquid glue to glue those down. And on top of each fish shadow is going to be a foam adhesive dot. This is where we're starting to build up to get the 3D effect. Yeah, I'm removing the sentiment shoreline there now. We don't need that yet. Make sure you remove the tops off of your adhesive dots, otherwise things won't stick. We know how. Ask me how I know. Now this is where I'm using a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 square of acetate, and when you use acetate, you will notice it has a film on both sides to protect it, so peel those off, both sides. Try not to handle it too much, and I'm letting gravity do the majority of the work here to float that acetate down on top of those fish shadows and just tap them onto those adhesive dots. And now I'm taking 3 more adhesive dots and putting those on top of the acetate right over the adhesive dots underneath it. Now we get to do the stamping for the fish. Yes, the fish get stamped with spots. I never noticed that koi fish had spots, but they do. So if you like to have very organized fish spots, you can mark, and in fact I did this on my stamp set. I marked which spots go with which fish body, and you can tell that from the pictures on the packaging. Otherwise, it's a free-for-all. You can spot your fish wherever you want them. There's a lot of spots, so have fun with that. I did bring in the obsidian ink because it does show that some of their spots are black. So I did my best to try and make it look like the packaging, but again, right, they're fish. Every fish is beautiful and different. And I'm using just the same colors I used for the fish. I'm using the Raspberry Sunset and the Melted Butterscotch and then the obsidian ink just to add those spots. It's kind of fun stamping fish spots. Now, I have to say, I've never been a person who is very comfortable doing characters on a project. And I consider fish characters, like, you know, little peoples or kids or teddy bears and things. I've never really been a person for that. My projects are usually more artsy, some flowers, some geometrics, a mix of all of that. And so that's why I really like this set. I said, you know what, I'm going to challenge myself. Let's play with these fish. This is out of my comfort zone. So to get past the fish being out of my comfort zone, I thought, okay, well, how can I own this, right? You got to own this. Well, that's what led me to create the 3D water effect, because I love embossing vellum and stenciling and embossing stencils and being very mixed media with my projects. And so I thought, well, if I can do something that's comfortable to me in the project as the majority of the project, then these fish, which are uncomfortable to me, are only really going to be an accessory to the project. And that took a lot of stress off of me thinking, these fish are out of my comfort zone. I can't do fish. I don't do fish. Because the fish actually just become an accessory to this beautiful background. And I think that is great. It's kind of how I work with the Mini Delight monthly subscription. I love the Mini Delight subscription because it allows you to use elements as like the jewelry to your card, not the actual card itself. So it really gets you comfortably out of your comfort zone. And I have to say, doing this project with that with that thought in my mind, I think I'm going to venture out and do some more characters. Maybe more fish. I want to do pink sparkle fish, unicorn fish, rainbow fish. I just think they're great. So I hope that little tip helps. If that tip helps, don't forget to leave me a comment. Let me know what you think, or what do you do to get out of your comfort zone? I would love to know. I'm sure we all would love to know, because you know what? Sometimes things are uncomfortable, but we want to break through. We want to use these things, right? So go with what you know and then enhance it with the new stuff. I think they're so cute with their black spots. It just came out so cute. And yep, see, I'm putting those stamps right back on that whole stamp package because they are kind of small. All right, let's get these fish off their sticky mat so we can get them put together. I'm bringing in their thin layers. And bringing in that white layer with the whiskers and the eyeballs. Now, here's how you assemble these fish. On the white layer, you're going to put liquid glue on the bottom. Not a lot. You don't need it to squish out, just enough. And with tweezers, I'm going to set that on top of the thin layer. Now, remember, that thin layer is embossed vellum. It's slippery, so this liquid glue that we just put on it is going to slip around. So just start at the nose there to line up your fish body and go backwards all the way towards the tail. Now put the liquid glue on top of the white layer. Pick up your stamped layer, and that will go right on top. Again, start at the nose and work your way back to the tail as you straighten him out. There he is. Isn't he cute? Look at that face, the fishy face. Here's our fishes. Now we get to add their fourth and final layer, which is those fancy fins. Now, I usually put my glue onto a silicone glue mat, but I could not find it. And so that's why I used my hand here. If you are a person who does not like sticky hands, then by all means, use a silicone glue mat or scrap paper or something. But you definitely want to use your tweezers to dip the fin into the glue and attach it to that fish. One fish has that big extra fin, and then the other two fish have these little fins. I just love the embossing, how you can see it so well in the enameled vellum that we did. I would definitely, if I had this set out and I was making fish for a project, I would definitely probably make a whole bunch just to have them, because it is really fun. It's really fun to make these guys. I would do them all different colors. So I have a whole bunch of fish ready to go. All right, there he is. Fishy, fishy, look at him go. That was my fish swimming. So now we can put our shoreline on the stamp wheel and get our sentiment. Now, I do not use black ink for my sentiments, very rarely. So I'm going to be using the melted butterscotch to stamp my sentiment. I like to use colors for sentiments, especially ones that are already being used in my project, just to give it some cohesive look. Kind of ties it all together. All right, now we can get to putting the rest of this card together. So we're going to add some of the adhesive dots on the back of our shoreline so that stands up. And because it's a long piece, you want to stagger your dots to give good structural support to elements if you have an element that's like this size. Because if the card is going through the mail and it could get smashed and kind of sag in the middle when it goes through the machines at the post office. So just strategically place your dots so that it has some good structure to it. And then starting at the tip again and working my way back, that's where we're going to put the shoreline. And now we can remove the paper off of that previous layer of foam dots we put on top of the acetate. And that is where we will adhere our fish. Now remember, the gray areas there is the shadow of the fish. So line up your fish and then kind of offset it a little bit so that you can see his shadow. That is what completes the 3D look for these fish. I think they are just so super cute. It's like when you're in the restaurant and they have the fish swimming underneath you. Have you ever been to a restaurant like that? I remember that as a kid. We went to a restaurant and they had fish swimming below the tables. Now I'm just going to add some of these beautiful sparkle gems, the black onyx gem sparkles, just to enhance, give it a little sophistication. I just love these. I don't use dots like this in a lot of my projects, but when they're special like this, yes, I'm going to use them. They are cool. I'm just picking them up with the tip of my craft knife there. There you are. That's our fish card. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.